Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits. Joining me today is Jamal Burger from Kickback. And instead of talking about helping nonprofits, this is an actual nonprofit. So, Jamal, welcome to the show.
Alex, thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
So, we've touched base a couple of times before this conversation, and I was really intrigued by what you do and motivated to have you be able to share some of your successes and your almost successes, let's call them, along the way. But before we get into all that, let's talk about Kickback itself. How did you decide to, or why did you decide to start Kickback, and what does Kickback even do?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, and I'm so happy that you've taken an interest in what we do. For me, Kickback is really tied to a very personal story, and the spark note of it is when I was a kid and growing up in a low income neighborhood and being raised by a teenage mom. Like my mom, she was 16 when she had me. I remember going from a kid size in shoes to an adult size, and it was my birthday. And every year, my mom would buy me a brand new pair of shoes for my birthday because she knew how much I loved basketball and how important new shoes were, and how even me, I think at that time, with knowing but not knowing how to articulate it, like sneakers were a big part of my identity. They made me feel confident in the sport that I was playing. It made me feel like the clothes I showed up in school didn't make me look like what my reality looked like at home. And it really offered me like a safe space to exist almost. So I just remember like being 12, I think I was 12, and I went from like size 6.5 to 7. So now I had to pay adult prices, or not me, my mom. My mom had to pay adult prices, and she looked at me and she said, if I buy you these shoes, I don't know about groceries this next week, Jamal. And like I just saw it in her eyes that she was really sad and hurt by this. And I think about it now, like she was younger than I am today, having this conversation with a 12-year-old. And it's remarkable that in that moment, it sticks with me because I just saw her face. And without even talking to her or telling her how I felt about the feelings that she was sharing with me, I kind of internalized it. And there's something beautiful and something very dangerous about that. And it kind of just took me down a path of decision making in an area where there weren't that many positive options. So when my mom tells me at 12 that she can't buy me shoes because it will affect groceries, and I see how much it affected her emotionally, it made me, okay, well, now it's my turn. I need to start making money in the house. Like I can be out till 8 o'clock. What can I do? So from there, I just started getting myself into trouble, not because I was a bad kid, but because I wanted to help my mom. And it wasn't just me. It was a lot of people. Like not I say a lot of people, but like I had a group of friends, and there's about 10 of us, and we used to take things, flip things. We go steal some headphones or take a bike or two, or like I don't know, just get some electronics and then sell them to other people so that we had the money to take care of ourselves, and it was no longer our mom's responsibility. But for me, I also had like a side job. I was selling chocolates, and I just remember like from that point on, I was buying groceries every weekend from 12, like just making that my responsibility for my mom and my younger sister at the time. But I fast track from there because there's a lot that I went through in high school, underfunded high school, no arts programs, no real basketball coach, no real support or infrastructure in any of the arenas that Kickback aims to empower youth in today. Yeah, I've been arrested. I learned my lesson, but I also saw my other friends get caught at different times at later stages that ultimately kind of like cut their legs off in a sense where like I got caught because I got arrested one time because I was trying to steal a novel that had a basketball player on it. And the only reason that I was doing that was because my teacher told me that I couldn't read a magazine in class because that wasn't considered real literature. And I wish he told me that, to make this magazine, there's like a whole office of people that are doing this for a living. And she never did that. And it's not her fault, but I think the problem with a lot of underfunded neighborhoods is that it's fear-based thinking, it's fear-based teaching, it's fear-based development. And that plays a part. And I'm going on a tangent, but like this is like how deep rooted it is for me, because I reach a point now where I'm in university and I hate it, but I only went to university because I wasn't presented alternatives to the doctor, teacher, lawyer, police officer, firefighter narrative. And I tried to become a sports doctor because I thought that's as unique as my life could get based on what I was taught up to the age I was at, where I had to decide what I was going to do post secondary. And I looked back at 21, 20, around 21, and I was like, I don't like what I'm doing. All my friends that I grew up with are gone, either in jail. And I say all my friends, like my closest friends between 12 to 14, they're all gone. They're either in jail, they've passed away, they suffer from severe mental health issues, or we've just lost contact for various reasons. And I really feel like I was the 1 out of 10 that, quote unquote, got a chance at something. And I just dropped out of university because I didn't like that either. And I quickly picked up photography as a hobby. I was borrowing cameras from whoever would lend me a camera. And within a short amount of time, I got a lot of recognition for what I was photographing at the time. And brands, they started emailing me and saying, "Hey, Jamal, like you have a large Instagram following. I want to send you sneakers." And I just thought it was so stupid, because where were you when I was a kid? And that's a very honest, immediate question that I had at the time. And now that I get older and I see how companies work and marketing objectives and all these other things that come with it, I guess I could understand. But I think at the root of where Kickback starts was just like a genuine questioning of, why can't these brands or companies that these kids look up to, and could be saved by in different ways at different times, why is there such a disconnect? Because there's something so special that could happen if there was a world in which collaboration could happen. So I took all those emails of people saying, "Hey, we want to send you sneakers." And I said, "Yeah, sure, send me them." But rather than like posting and tagging them and thanking them, that wasn't important to me. What was important to me was figuring out how I could give these to kids, so that those kids who are now, no pun intended, in the shoes that I was in when I was 12 or 13, they could have the chance to save money and show up to school with some version of confidence. And Kickback is really just founded on this idea of, yeah, providing footwear to youth in neighborhoods where, like, showing up as equal is not the easiest thing to do. And our first ever event was just a sneaker drive, and it was a back to school sneaker drive in the same community that I grew up in, so that parents didn't have to worry about footwear for the kids going back to school, because it's anywhere from $150 to $250. And it's a really big price tag. And then from there, the way my mind works is like, things could always be better. And we're at now, we're approaching year 8, and where Kickback is now is the result of this like snowball effect of event after event after event, and just wanting it to be better. So now we're at this point now where we run programs throughout the year, and it's still rooted in accessing footwear, but we've found unique ways to incorporate that into like our programs and moments.
That's an incredibly touching story. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm very happy that you've taken a challenge in your life and made something positive as a result of it. And as a result, are able to help so many kids, which we'll get to the impact shortly. But thank you for sharing that, is what I wanted to start with.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for letting me share that.
So if you were to summarize the mission of Kickback today, is it, because I know you got multiple things happening, which we'll get to also.
Yeah.
But quintessentially, you're just basically, not just, you're basically summing it up, getting shoes on kids that need them so that they don't have to make that tough, difficult choice between groceries and footwear. Would that be I'm taking your words and paraphrasing it. Maybe you have a better way of saying it than I do.
Yeah. That's where it started. That's where it started. That was the initial intention behind Kickback. But then when I start to reflect on high school, elementary school, and just like the gaps in education and offerings, it really motivated me, where like, if I can use these sneakers as a tool to get people into a room. From there, what else can I offer them? And right now, with where Kickback is, 7.5 years later, our mission, Kickback's mission is to create a world of opportunity at the intersection of sports, art, and education. Why? Because I feel like opportunities that exist in underfunded schools aren't relevant to the majority of kids because underfunded, underprivileged or not, every kid in this world just wants to figure out how to be successful as themselves. And I think, well, not I think, I believe that at the intersection of sports, art, and education, there's a plethora of crossovers where kids now have options to say, hey, this feels like me. And Kickback offering programs in a way that helps them be themselves on their way to some version of their dream.
Wow. Okay. So quite an evolution as well. Let's talk about maybe next the kinds of things that you do. You mentioned events. So, putting people in a room, what does that mean to you? Like, what kind of events have you hosted or participated in or partner with?
Yeah, so and now with the sneakers, how they show up in our programs and in our moments, it's like there's the sneakers either they could be an achievement, they could be something that they're granted to wear in a photo shoot to like celebrate their accomplishment. And then they also show up in like our back to school moments, which is still at the core of fundamental to Kickback and just making sure kids can show up and go to school with proper footwear. But like where we're at now, like throughout the year, this year we're running 7 programs. We have 2 art programs, 2 education programs, 2 art programs, 3 education programs, and 2 sport programs. And the sneaker shows up at key points throughout each program journey, and it offers connection, it offers celebration, it offers. I'm really big into content, and that's just due to the nature of my background as a photographer. I'm really into storytelling, and I truly believe that with every program that we have, like if you were to go on our website right now, it's like we don't look like a nonprofit. We look like a community. So when you say what are the spaces or the rooms that we help get these kids into, it's like I'm just trying to create a world where kids can see other people that look like them, have gone through things like them, but we're not there to promote fear-based thinking, or we're not here to encourage the immediate result. We're here to create a space where kids can feel safe around others and talk about their dreams and have the support to work towards them, if that makes sense. So with the events that we do have, it's like we've run basketball tournaments on courts that have been redesigned and refurbished by kids within the community themselves. We give out hundreds of haircuts every year for back to school in tandem with footwear. We we have programs where kids learn how to make their first short film. We have a program where we teach youth how to start their own initiative and build their own nonprofit from the ground up. And we have a program where we get kids on a plane for the first time and see a different part of Canada because their environment isn't the safest. And like a few days where you don't have to look over your shoulder makes the biggest difference in the world. So every program that we have is tied to a specific experience that like I've either gone through, staff within the organization have gone through, or like youth are saying that they're struggling with now.
Yeah, well, one of my questions was going to be how do you decide what kind of programs that you kind of answered the question right before I was about to ask it. Is there, I mean, there must be some kind of, I'm just curious to know your actual thought process in this because there must be all kinds of ideas that are floating around. Is there any kind of filtering mechanism where you decide as an organization, this works, like I see the need or we see the need, but it doesn't quite fit yet with our mission? Or do you see it yourself as more fluid to say, the more, not the more the better, but there must be some kind of mechanism where you say this doesn't quite fit. Like you have to have some
Yeah.
criteria to. So I'm curious how that works.
Yeah. So, and this is kind of where full transparency comes to the table. And I started, I started Kickback at 23, and my how well versed I was in strategic thinking, in saying no, non-negotiables. These are all things that I've learned over time. And my mentality before anything was, let's take over. Let's do it all. Let's every single problem in the neighborhood, I want to create a solve for. But what I've realized over the years is what's most important is building out programs that you are best equipped to offer. Yeah, as much as we'd love to have a have a program in pottery, or we'd love to, you know, bring kids to the museums multiple times a month, like that does in some way offer a benefit, but it isn't aligned. And it goes back to what you're saying, like I've gone through the trials and tribulations of learning how important it is to marry myself to the vision, and understanding like how I may have these values, but my level of discernment can at times counteract those values, not from a place of hypocrisy, but more so from a place of discernment. And yeah, we're at a point now where, especially like in the last couple of years, what we've done is to the best of our ability. And this also like touches on just like learning how to generate funds for a nonprofit. But just based on our capacity, we've gone through the process of like creating evaluation methods for impact. And we were doing a lot more a couple years ago, but we've kind of trimmed it down, and we will be trimming it down in as early as 2025. But we're already in the thick of like the 7 programs that we are running. So yeah, I think evaluation methods, impact tracking, measurements, these have all been works in progress for us. And it's because I was very, this kid is not a number. And I think it was a deep rooted feeling of like, I'm not a number. And because I grew up similar to the kids that we serve, I never wanted to describe them as a number. So I was very anti impact measures. I was very, his name is his name is Kofi. He's not the 18th kid that has gotten a job as a result of this program. I just had a hard time coming to terms with that. And in that process, I've learned that there's a sweet spot, and I'm currently in the midst of working closely with my leadership team how to ethically measure impact so that the people we serve are treated and measured and accounted for as human beings, but at the same time, there's an opportunity to scale and share metrics with people who want to invest but need to understand where their money's going. So this is kind of like one of the things in my wheelhouse right now that I'm personally navigating and making sense of for the best interest of the organization and like our staff team and our staff.
I can imagine it's quite a conflict not to want to number things and put metrics on things. There's a on one side, I get the humane side of things that you want to treat them as individuals. At some point, it becomes difficult, especially if you're trying to ask for funding, creating partnerships. People want to see stats and numbers and metrics and impact. And so I imagine that's a very difficult place to be in. I'm curious to know, how are you reconciling that in your own thoughts?
How am I reconciling that? It's less about reconciling, and I'm more so motivated. I'm motivated to find a way where there's statistics and humanity all in one. And that's not easy to do. And I'm sure there's people who figured it out, but this is also, I think I'm also just like learning how to detach from my own personal experience, because a big part of why Kickback exists is because I didn't have the help that I needed when I was a kid. So the greatest and hardest part about running an organization that is directly tied to a challenging part of your life, or I should say my life, is at every stage of discovery, a different part of my childhood comes to surface. And I'm forced to confront it, make sense of it, accept it, forgive it, and remember that there's a bigger picture at play. So I think there's reconciliation and motivation kind of mixed together in figuring out what is most important to impact as many youth as responsibly as possible.
As you're approaching these organizations for partnerships, I imagine, because these shoe companies, you don't have to name names; it's not really important. But the idea is that you are approaching them with an idea, whether it's to sponsor, donate shoes, or participate in some way. I'm curious to know how that outreach happens on your side. How do you approach them with this idea to get them motivated? Is it, my first thought would be it's telling your story, telling the reason why Kickback exists, and making it personal and emotional. But there might be other avenues. I'm curious to know what you found as a success recipe, or so far at least, what has been successful for you in building those kinds of relationships with shoe companies and other partnerships.
Well, I think the most successful outcomes that happen with these brands is when they realize that their marketing campaigns could be so much more impactful. And although the marketing campaign that they're spending on, if they were to work with community members, maybe rather than their target audience, you can still figure out how to communicate the marketing campaign to your target audience and figure out what they care about or figure out what they were missing or what they hoped for. And I think that's what I'm like ultimately pushing for. It's just like you can spend money to like create these ads, but like you could also put money into an experience and produce ad like quality materials such as photos, storytelling, video pieces. And it can resonate a lot further. Like for me, in a perfect world, what I've seen as successful is when we work with a brand like Puma and they say, "Hey, we want to build new courts." And sure, we could build new courts, take pictures of it, post it on social media platforms and say, "Look at this new court." But that's like surface level impact, in my opinion. Like when we rebuilt a court with Puma, there were youth that had a say in what the court looked like. And when the court was unveiled, they were celebrated as individuals who redesigned the basketball court. And it's it's just taking that idea one step further and figuring out how can I incorporate a group that is disadvantaged in some way. It doesn't have to be my community. It could be a different community, but I do think that like every single company, every single brand, every single corporation, if you're going to put money into anything, make the effort to say, is there an opportunity to like change somebody's life versus just having an impression? And like I've been able to cultivate some genuine brand partnerships with like Asics, Puma, Arc'teryx, because I've had a career outside of being the executive director as like a photographer and a filmmaker, now more film than anything. I've leveraged my contacts and tried to mediate and explain their investment in community can result in their marketing objectives as well. So we have a run club where if you run with us 3 times of any age, you get brand new ASICs. And this is beneficial to ASICs is because over 50% of the people that are earning these shoes after 3 runs like have never purchased a pair of ASICs before. And when they put the ASICs on and they realize how comfortable they are, for the rest of their life, if they need a comfortable pair of running shoes, they're going to pick ASICs first. Not just because ASICs is comfortable, but ASICs was the first brand to empower them to run in their mind. And inspiring people is the greatest act. And I've had some success, and obviously, like it's the long-term impact that we're working towards articulating. But at the same time, it all comes down to this fundamental belief that I've now cemented in my mind, and I dream and will continue to advocate for. But businesses need to think more like nonprofits, and nonprofits need to think more like businesses. And I think we can create a better world if both sides can be a bit more intentional in that sense.
I totally agree with you. We hear often on the show that nonprofits should behave like businesses because they are. It's not often enough that we say that not for-profit businesses should behave as nonprofits, and I totally agree with that as well. We should be trying to have an impact. It's one of the reasons why I work in the nonprofit space is because of the impact and the people that attracts that want to make an impact versus just increasing shareholder profitability. But I would love to see a world too where that it's no longer a clear distinction between those two types of organizations.
Yeah, and I think sometimes profit exists in the intangibles. It's just hard to quantify, and that's been like the blessing and curse in my approach.
I'm curious if you could share maybe a challenge or two you've come across, something we haven't mentioned up into this point in the conversation, but just some kind of challenge you've had that you faced and either have started to overcome it or have overcame it. And I can't even think of an example off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's been roadblocks and hiccups along the way. And I was wondering if you could just share one of those instances.
Yeah. An example of a challenge that we've gone through, made it out of, and we're still here today. Yeah, when I started Kickback, I kind of did a self audit and asked myself, what was I good at and what was I not so good at? And very within the year of me coming up with the idea and pushing it forth as like this organization for impact, I reached out to like a good friend of mine who I felt like could be very supportive in helping me just be there in like my weaker areas. And he said yes. And we ended up working together very closely for 4 years. But we reached this point where we were doing all this impactful work, but the only two people that were really feeling it emotionally, physically, financially were him and myself. And it reached a point where he was like, I need to get paid to do this. And if I don't get paid, I can't stay here. And I took what he said, but it took time. It took time to accrue the resources to offer some sort of like compensation. Like we went from going out of pocket to just covering his costs, not even covering my costs. And this is like, we're already impacting like hundreds of youth a year, just like out of the goodness of our hearts. And then it gets to a point where just covering costs is not enough and making money is essential. And yeah, he had to take a great opportunity right before we got some sort of funds that could pay him. And it was an adjustment. It was a really big adjustment to like lose at the time somebody so integral to the organization because we kept missing out on a grant by a bit, or because when a company would offer us a donation, we gave it to the kids before we gave to ourselves. And I think at the core of it is just like we we would give to others before we would give to ourselves 10 times out of 10. And if I could go back and change anything, I'd probably just lower the ratio of how often we gave to others before giving to ourselves. But there has to be a balance. And for some it's 50-50, for some it's 40-60, 60-40, 30, whatever the math is. But we really gave our all to the organization, and it resulted in a depletion of resources and ability to continue on. And how we recovered from that was not easy, but the lesson learned was, if you're going to have staff, yes, we're a nonprofit, but we need to take care of the people that are doing the work. And there's an imposter syndrome that comes with growing up in the neighborhood that you're serving and wondering if you take care of yourself or the community. And it's neither nor, but it's finding a balance, and learning to find that balance has been a is an ongoing thing. Like even today, like how much goes to programming, how much goes to staffing, um, who's volunteering, who's not volunteering, and what's responsible, so we still navigate it today. But what I've learned at the very least is like there needs to be a base level of support in place for the people who are giving the community everything they have.
Yeah, as grateful as everyone would be, and how awesome would it be if you didn't have to get paid to do what you love to do? I mean, at the end of the day, we live in a world where you need money to live. And until that changes, there has to be that balance. You have to, even if you're doing the best work possible, you have to get paid for it at some level so that you can continue doing that good work, right? It can't be just all completely altruistic and whatnot. But I also take from that thread as well is that this individual seemed to be almost more than a partner. He was at a certain point a mentor as well. And I was curious to know if you have any kind of people that you relied to as coaches or mentors or outside information to help guide you, or as a team, not necessarily as an individual, to be able to make better decisions for your organization.
Yeah, one thing about me is that I'm not afraid to ask for help. I think that was the thing that held me back for a very long time. But then when I really step into it, it's the thing that pushes me forward. I ask for help as often as I possibly can. And I don't just ask for help for myself, I ask for help for my team. Yeah, mentorship is a huge, huge thing for me. I appreciate mentorship and I offer mentorship, and I will, whether it be today, 20, 30 years from now, I hope to always be in a position where I'm learning and teaching simultaneously. I think it's the most fulfilling situation for me to be in. And yeah, like with that being said, like my current set of mentors are encompassing of executive directors, former directors, former founders, people that are in the industry for promoting and encouraging arts, the nonprofit space in general, and yeah, just people who are firsts. I There's moments where I feel very alone in all of this, and but the best thing is to not feel alone. So whenever I can talk to somebody, age, race, position, doesn't matter. Like being a first is always hard. And even whether you are a first or not, if you feel like a first, it's a valid feeling. And yeah, just navigating that. Mentors that can offer me insight on feeling alone, but ultimately knowing that you're not alone. That's always fulfilling for me.
What do you see in Kickback's short-term future? I'm curious to know, like, if you had, like, do you have any aspirational goals as an organization? Is it more just growing as you are, or do you have certain programs that you have your eye on that you aren't quite ready yet for, but you hope to accomplish in the next coming years?
The beautiful thing about Kickback is we've done so much that in our short-term future, it's figuring out how to go from doing the wide work to the deep work. And that means, okay, all seven of these programs are impactful, but which five are essential, or which three are essential, so that we can dive deeper into the mission, the vision, and seeing the intended outcomes we hope for. So really with Kickback, it's asking ourselves the hard questions of like, what is impactful and what is going to get us as close to the vision as possible in the fewest battles possible. So yeah, it's just organizing and setting ourselves up for like operating in the most optimal manner. So we just hired a general manager, and already I'm feeling so much better about the team because I realize too, like as an executive director slash founder, sometimes it's my capacity that gets in the way of the team's growth. So as we expand leadership, we expand potential.
That kind of introspection is actually really interesting because I've heard time and time again, especially from consultants who are helping nonprofits, that sometimes the founders do get in the way, that they're so tightly coupled and it's such a personal mission for them that they have a hard time letting go. And sometimes letting go is actually what is necessary for the organization to thrive. So I'm really happy to hear that you've already crossed that barrier and understanding that yes, it still has to be personal. It is still personal, but at the same time, in order to become the best version that it can possibly be, it needs to be contributed by more than just one person. So I'm grateful for that you're able to that you saw that.
Yeah. One of the things I'll add to that is sometimes people get so caught up in their work they can forget who they are. And I always try to remind myself that I am not who I am because of my work, but the work I do is because of who I am. And it requires a constant reminder because we live in a world where identity is so much tied to what we do that we forget who we are. And it's always essential to kind of come back to who am I and what has come to life as a result of my effort, my love, my existence. And it allows you to separate or create like just distinguish a boundary between you and your work so that you can kind of create space, because if your work is intrinsically tied to your identity or your character, everyone around you, behind you, in front of you is waiting on you and what you have going on. And if you don't work today, then the work doesn't work today, you know? So you, it's really important to kind of create that understanding. And for me, it's come from a lot of writing and reflection and feedback from the team, which I'm truly appreciative of.
I can't imagine anyone listening to this isn't touched by your story. And so I'm hoping that you can share with people how they can help in some way. How can they contribute? Is it through donations, through partnerships? How can someone across the country? Is it just Canada, by the way? I didn't even ask the question. Is it just Canada or Canada and the US?
Yeah, we're based in Canada. We've taken a break, global outreach and bringing shoes to different countries each year, but it is something that we want to bring back as
Mhm.
early as 2025. However, with where we are right now, and in terms of if someone is listening to this, how they can help, yeah, I mean, we're looking to cultivate intentional partnerships. We're looking to build our team, gain insight, learn more about the sector. And yeah, of course, like donations always go a long way. And yeah, just even listening helps, because I feel it's really, really challenging, not just for myself, but anyone else in my shoes, when you create something that is the result of trauma, how much it affects you. And with where the organization is at and where I'm at now, it's really the results of just going through it and fighting every step of the way, fighting for funding, fighting for understanding, fighting for opportunity, fighting for equity. And just to be here for you to listen to me today and to share Kickback's story is already a win in my mind. So yeah, help can be authentic partnerships, insight. My team is always looking for help, so I'm always looking for help. So if anything that I said resonate, reach out. We're open.
How can people get in touch with you then?
Yeah, so you can reach out to us through our website, kickback.org, or you can send us a message on Instagram at Kickback Foundation. You can also reach out to us via LinkedIn, the Kickback Foundation. And yeah,
Jamal, this has been a very touching episode. Thank you so much for sharing your story.
thank you for having me. And thank you for sharing Kickback's story with a larger community of people who care.
All right, that's it for today. I am Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.